Hello and good afternoon. CTS266 Section 840 students for the fall 2016 semester at Anne Arundel Community College. This is the CCNP Switch course, and this afternoon's video tutorial is going to be on Discovery Activity number 3 from Cisco Learning Labs, and this is all about VTP operation. Again, these are great activities to, after you do the reading, to attempt the discovery activities, go back and review anything that you missed, and then move on to the challenge activities. So let's go ahead and jump in. This is going to be all about VTP. I don't believe we're doing VTP version 3, although a quick note on that, if you were to Google Cisco VTP version 3, I highly recommend reading through this solution guide here. It really goes into some great detail about not only the additional benefits of VTP v3, but the differences between the previous versions, VTP v3, v2, and v1. And this is just a really, really good document. It gives you some examples as to what the different VTP domains would look like. It goes through some configuration commands. So again, very good document to take a peek at on the Cisco website. So let's go ahead and dive in here. So step 1 in our Cisco Learning Labs is we're going to, and this is actually going to launch a window that I did not want up here. So let me really quickly, I apologize, let's switch this over to the web telnet. There we go, and then let's make the text as large as we can. All right, so we're going to jump on to switch 1 here, and we're going to go from user exec into privilege exec with the enable command. And let's take a look at what the VTP status is looking like right now. So as you can see, again, when we talk about VTP, we're talking about the VLAN trunking protocol, and specifically on this version of IOU, all 3 versions of VTP are supported. The version that we're running and that you run by default is version 1. You can see that the VTP domain name, this is not the default. That has been set. By default, the domain name is simply null. Right? We're not doing any pruning and no VTP trap generation. You can see that the device ID, this is my MAC address for this switch, for switch number 1. Right? So what VT mode are we in? Well, we're in VTP client mode, which means that we are not going to be able to make changes to the VLAN database. We can see that this version of IOU supports 1005 VLANs on my, I have a 2950 that's pretty old, and I believe it supports only 64 VLANs. So again, newer equipment's going to support more VLANs. Number of existing VLANs, we have 5 on here. My guess is it's going to be VLAN 1, and then it's going to be the other standard range VLANs that are reserved, which are going to be 1002 to 1005. So 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that should give us the 5. We'll take a look at that in a second. The configuration revision number. So as you can see here, this client has not seen any revisions. And if we were to do a password, this will be the MD5 digest that we'll be using. So let's go ahead now and jump over to switch 2. Let me squeegee this off here. We'll get back. Come to our diagram, and now let's take a look at switch 2, and let's see what switch 2 has configured on his end. So we'll go from user exec to privilege exec, show VTP status, and you can see here much the same, right? Version 1, and the difference is going to be right here, the operating mode. So this is the VTP server. Now he also says 5 VLAN. So if I were to say show VLAN brief, let's take a look and see how many VLANs we have. Well, here they are. VLAN 1, which again is your default. You cannot rename it. You cannot remove it. Right? So it is going to be there. And then we have these 4 reserved, 1002 through 1005, and these were for FIDI and Token Ring, and these just simply aren't used in modern day networks anymore. However, for backward compatibility, they're left in there. All right, so that's what switch number 2 looks like. And now let's come over to switch number 3. We'll have all 3 switches up here in a second. Whoops. Over to switch number 3. We'll go from user exec to privilege exec, show VTP status. And this is a transparent mode switch, right? So we've got a client in switch 1, we've got a server, VTP server in switch 2, and then we have a transparent mode switch on switch 3. So let's go ahead and say it shows 5 VLANs as well. So if I say show VLAN brief, you can see that everybody has the same 5 VLANs, that nothing has been configured from a VLAN perspective yet. So let's come over to switch 2 because it looks like we're going to be making some changes here. So we're going to go into global config with the configure terminal command, and I'm simply going to say VLAN 10. And I'll go ahead and we'll throw a name on here and we'll just call it engineering. All right. So now that we've created the VLAN on VLAN 10, if I were to say do show VLAN brief, are we going to see VLAN 10? And we're not. And this, as I commented in a previous video, the reason is that we need to first exit from the VLAN database subconfiguration menu. So now when I say do show VLAN brief, there is VLAN 10. So now remember, we're doing this change on the server. So show VTP status, you can see that we are the server. So the change on the server should propagate down to the clients. We can also see right here the configuration revision number has now incremented because we've made a single change. So it incremented to 1. Number of existing VLANs is 6. So let's check and see, did switch 1, who was our client, pick up the information from switch 2? So show VLAN brief, and absolutely switch 1 has picked up that information. If we say show VTP status, you can see that the configuration revision number matches and the number of VLANs match. Now remember, in order for these two switches to successfully use VTP and to set up this VTP client-server relationship, remember that the trunk needs to be an 802.1q trunk, and the domain names need to match. And if we add passwords, the passwords would also need to match. So, but at the basic level, the domain names need to match. All right, so now let's go over onto switch 3. Remember, switch 3 is a transparent mode switch. So when I say show VLAN brief, what are we going to see? Are we going to see VLAN 10 or not? What do you think? And if you're saying no, you're absolutely right. Because remember, show VTP status, what is the status of switch 3? It is a transparent mode switch. And what this means is, as a transparent mode switch, switch 3, when he receives VTP traffic or VTP frames, he will forward the VTP information on, right? So a VTP advertisement is going to get flooded. Switch 3 is a transparent mode switch. So when he receives any kind of an advertisement, he is simply going to go ahead and forward that advertisement on. Now this is different from VTP operating mode off. So if I went into global config here and I said VTP mode, do a question mark, you can see that off is a possibility. And what off does, and remember this is a key difference, is that when you have VTP mode transparent, if I'm receiving VTP advertisements, I am going to go ahead and be a good neighbor and I am going to pass those advertisements along. If I'm set to VTP mode off, then what I'm going to do is my behavior is just like transparent mode, except I am not going to be a good neighbor and I am not going to pass along those advertisements. So again, in an environment where you're not running VTP, you're not expected to be running VTP, and security is of the utmost concern, VTP mode off would be the way to go. Because again, transparent mode, if it's receiving VTP advertisements, it's going to pass those guys along. So let's do this. Remember that whether it's mode off or mode transparent, remember that the VLANs created on switch 3, because it's a transparent mode switch, are going to be locally significant. And so that was, we'll make this the HR VLAN. So remember, if I say do show VLAN brief, you can see here that the VLAN doesn't show up. Well, why is that? Exactly, because we're still in the VLAN database, or I should say the VLAN configuration mode. So we're still manipulating the VLAN database. So when I say exit though, and I come back with do show VLAN brief, there is, what am I trying to say here? There is VLAN 30 for HR. Okay, so now let's make sure, is it locally significant? So if I come over to switch 2 and say do show VLAN brief, will we see a VLAN 30? We will not, because remember, switch 3 is a transparent mode switch. So neither switch 2 or switch 1 are going to have VLAN 30, because transparent mode and off mode VTP switches, all of your changes are locally significant to those switches. So again, transparent mode switch can create, delete, and do everything it needs to do locally. So if I'm on the client switch here, which is switch 1, what's going to happen if I go into global config and I say VLAN 99? Exactly. We're going to get a message here that tells us VTP VLAN configuration not allowed when device is in the client mode. Now remember, one of the things to be wary of is don't introduce new legacy switches, like maybe a switch is on the shelf and you have a switch that dies. Before you put that switch in your environment, make sure that you completely scrub and sanitize that switch so that it comes in with no VLAN.dat, no VTP settings, and that it is all by itself. All right, well, this again was a very quick but good activity to show you what happens when you've got a client mode VTP switch, a server mode VTP switch, and a transparent mode VTP switch. And so the last thing that we're going to do is, remember I said that if it's transparent mode, it's going to pass along the information. So let's do this. Let's change this to transparent mode. Let's make this the server and this the client. So let's spice this up a little bit before we let this activity go, because let's see, does the transparent mode switch, when he receives a VTP advertisement, is he going to play nice and pass it along? Or actually, I'm going the wrong way here. He's going to get it this way. Does he pass it on to the client over here? And in fact, let's see, would it be easier to simply say that this is already the client? Whoops. Yeah, so we'll switch this guy to transparent. We'll make switch 3 the server, and we'll leave him in transparent mode. So let's go ahead and squeegee this off here. Let's step over to, first we'll hit switch 2 up. So on switch 2, I'm going to say VTP mode transparent, right? And let's say do show VTP status. Were we with, we were running version 1. Well, I'm going to run VTP version 2. Right? And this is one of the differences here. Go to global config, VTP version 2. Cannot modify version in VTP client mode. So we'll simply say VTP mode transparent, VTP version 2, and then VTP mode client. So now when I say do show VTP status, there we go. All right. So again, 6 VLANs, configuration revision number is 0. This is our transparent mode switch, right? And do show VTP status. Whoops. Do show VTP status. Again, version 2, domain name is good. So now we'll come over to switch 3, and this is going to be my VTP server. So VTP mode server, and then the VTP version 2. And then do show VTP status. All right, how about do show VLAN brief? All right, so this is going to be tricky now. Let's see what happens here. If I come over to switch 1, and you can see it's saying it's got a VTP protocol user notification MD5 digest. It might have been receiving that. Maybe an old message. We'll see if we continue to get that. We should not. Whoops, sorry. Do show VTP status. So there we go. No configuration changes, but we're version 2, so we're good there. This guy is now version 2, CCNP, and same thing here. So let's go into switch 3, who is our server. Do show VTP status. This is the server, so we're going to say VLAN 50 to, well actually, yeah, we'll do 50 to 100. And then I'll say end. So now when I say do show VLAN brief, sorry, do show, or sorry, we don't need the do. Show VLAN brief, you can see we now have VLANs 50 through 100. And again, this is our VTP server. So now switch 2, who's in the middle, he's in transparent mode, do show VLAN brief. He still only has that VLAN that he had configured initially, VLAN 10, when he was the server. So he did not pick anything up. But now the big question mark, right? So here's our server. Here's a transparent mode switch in the middle. And here's my client. So let's see, is the transparent mode switch in the middle, is he being a good neighbor and passing along the VTP advertisements over to switch 1? And he is not. You see that? So switch 1's a client switch, but he is not picking anything up. So let's see what's going on here. Do show VTP status. And definitely in client mode. Do show VTP password. I did not I did not check to see if a password was set. Do show VTP password. Cisco in the transparent mode switch, did he have it? Show VTP password. Aha! So the passwords do not match. So let's go into global config, VTP password Cisco. So now the password's been changed to Cisco. Let me say VLAN 100 to 150 and end. So now that our passwords match, does that make any difference? Do show VLAN brief and take a look there. 50 through 100 and then 100 through 150. So we had a password mismatch where the server did not have a password and the transparent mode switch did. So now the final check, because let's validate what I'm telling you here. So we've conclusively been able to show that if you have a transparent mode switch in the middle, just like I said, and remember we're doing VTP version 2 here, that if this is my server and this is my client, the transparent mode switch, he will send on those advertisements. In fact, if I were to squeegee this and clear this, and let's bring up switch 2, if I were to say debug, whoops, VTP, or actually is there, I'm not sure you can debug VTP. Debug VLAN, VRF. Yeah, you can't. So debug VLAN, let's see if that gives us a VTP choice. No. So yeah, I was going to see if there's a way to debug this out, but I don't see it. So I was hoping to have it show us the messages that it's seen. So here's what we're going to do now. So switch 2, let's confirm the final thing I told you, which was if the VTP mode is off for VLANs, right? Do show VTP status. The VTP mode is off. So when I come to switch 3 here, and I go into global config and I say VLAN, and we're going to make this 500 to 600, and I say end, show VLAN brief, and there we go. There's VLANs 500 through 600. Keeping in mind that a VLAN is a subnet, is a broadcast domain, is its own independent network. Do we see those here? Because this is an off mode now. Do show VLAN. So this still should not see anything, right? It doesn't, because everything on off and transparent mode is locally significant to the switch. Now for the big question. Over to switch 1, who is depending on switch 2 in VTP off mode to pass along those VTP advertisements so that he can update his VLAN database. But we know transparent mode works. We've seen that. The VLANs are right there. What about off mode? Do show VTP. Do show VLAN brief. Did we get VLANs 500 to 600? And the answer is no. And so that's what I love about these Learning Lab activities is that you do what's there, right? But test things out. Get in there and change things up a little bit, because again, you can't break anything. If you get stuck, always remember that you could come back to your Manage Devices tab and simply reload the configuration on all of those switches. All right, well, we definitely did it up this week on VLANs, VTP, and trunking, and I will see you guys on Monday night. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.